Yep, so I'm Natasha Rattu. I'm the Executive Director of Karma Nirvana, and I run a national charity for victims and survivors of honour-based abuse. We deliver a Home Office commissioned helpline where we get thousands of victims that contact our helpline every year. We do lots of training, campaigning, so lots of work in this space trying to make people aware of the issues that we deal with as a specialist charity.
Okay, great. And you are taking part in the panel, Why Do We Need to Talk About Domestic Abuse? From your experience, why is it so critical that we talk more openly about it and more often about it?
I think the reality is it's so hidden. I think the statistic is now 1 in 5 women will be affected by domestic abuse at some point in their life. But the reality is 1 in 5 women won't talk about it. So we've got to make this a safe subject for people to feel able to speak about without judgment, without shame, and understanding that when they do reach out, help is available. So it's really critical in order to prevent this, but also ensure that people who are going through this get the help that they need, that we talk about it at every opportunity that we get.
Okay, and you deal not exclusively, but largely you already mentioned about honour-based abuse. Can you just talk to me about the differences or what it is specifically about honour-based abuse that makes it a different talking point from domestic abuse generally?
Yeah, so honour-based abuse is a form of domestic abuse in that the person who is a victim of the abuse is being abused by somebody personally connected to them. So it can include, like we commonly see with domestic abuse, a partner or an ex-partner. But what we also see with honour-based abuse is a pattern of people being abused by family members. That can include parents, siblings, uncle, aunt. So there is an extension of potential perpetrators. And when we think about what honour-based abuse is in and of itself, it's where a person is perceived as not upholding expectations that are rooted in this notion of needing to keep expectations to keep this notion of honour and to prevent shame from occurring. So it's where people are being abused for a perception that they have brought shame or dishonour to not only themselves, but potentially to their wider community. And the very nature of it being a broader set of perpetrators and happening within a community or society means that often victims have additional barriers and complexities to reaching out. They often feel like they are in the wrong for going against their family or their community. So many people don't even recognise what it is that they are experiencing is honour-based abuse because of the conditioning, the deep conditioning and normalisation, often from a very early point in life.
And I suppose it must make it not just more difficult to talk about or to speak to somebody about, as you mentioned, but it must make it, in many cases, vastly more complicated because you are not generally dealing with two people, which some people might think of as a domestic abuse situation, but you're dealing with, as you say, whole communities. You're dealing with history, legacy, tradition, all of those things which are tied up in this.
Absolutely. And what we're really clear on is that there is no excuse for abuse, no matter what community it takes place in or whatever kind of notion is being weaponized. Often it's culture, it's tradition that's being weaponized, but it's essentially abuse. Abuse is abuse wherever it happens. So it's about being really clear to victims that this is abuse and there is no justification for what is going on. But in terms of the complexities, what does make it really complex is not only that victims don't recognize it for themselves very often, but the professionals around the victims don't necessarily understand it either. So when you have, for example, a victim then going to the police to report abuse, and it might be that there is one perpetrator, that officer may not understand the wider complexities around how they possibly may not be able to go to their parents to get support in leaving a perpetrator who could be their husband, because there is this perception that it could bring shame. So they've got to go back and make it work. So, it's about recognizing, I suppose, for the victim that there are just all these layers of complexities, not only for themselves, but the systems that operate where they would be expected to go and get help, that help doesn't always exist for them quite naturally.
Mm-hmm. And it will be, I suppose, a positive thing to talk about many of these issues at the Leeds International Festival of Ideas. And I think specifically for West Yorkshire, and many people that have worked in local journalism here will remember the case of Shafilia Ahmed, which was a truly shocking case, which brought some of these issues to the wider public. How important is it, and how encouraged are you that people are willing to sort of come into a room and talk about these very, very difficult and very painful issues for many people, and just get some of it more out into the open and have more understanding as a result?
I think it's really important. At the beginning of this conversation, we spoke about how important is it to talk about domestic abuse. And there are some parts of domestic abuse that are very much more invisible than others, honour-based abuse being one of those. One of the things that we notice is whenever we deliver training or whenever we talk about the issues that we deal with, we immediately give people confidence, professional confidence, and professional curiosity to explore these issues wherever they may happen and feel confident to do it. I think particularly in the climate that we're living in, there are lots of victims who fear coming forward because they fear that the professionals may not necessarily recognise or may stereotype or may judge experiences. So all of this kind of lends to the point of it being really important to have these conversations really critically so people feel confident and prepared to support somebody who may be going through this.
I just wondered what it was that attracted you to the festival, why it was that you wanted to become involved, and not just because it's a couple of miles down the road to the playhouse.
So, yeah, absolutely. So the Leeds International Festival of Ideas, the thought of being part of an audience where, Leeds is one where I live and where this is happening, but it's really important to be having these conversations outside of London in a space where actually these conversations don't typically happen in places like Leeds. So I'm really grateful to be able to have this platform to talk in an area where actually the issues that we're here to talk about are happening quite prevalently. In fact, West Yorkshire has one of the highest reporting areas of honour-based abuse. It's one of the, beyond the Metropolitan Police Force areas. So it shows why it's absolutely critical to be talking about these issues in Leeds. And it's a real privilege to have this platform at such a prestigious event like this to do so.